Hey Tally, I've been looking everywhere for you. What are you doing in Bastion?
Oh, hi Evie. I'm glad you're here because I've come to a momentous decision.
Oh, wow, you're finally going to stay away from the T&E Twitter account? Like I say, it'll be tough, but I think it's the right call in the long run.
No, Evie. As if. I've finally made a choice on which covenant I am going to pledge my sword to in Shadowlands.
Whoa, are you sure, Tally? That's a pretty big commitment, you know.
Yeah, I know that.
It's not the kind of thing you can just change your mind about, like getting married or having a child.
Yeah, I know that. It's taken me weeks of research and deliberation. I've weighed up all the pros and cons, all the characters and aesthetics and soulbinds, the zones, the music. Some really tough lines were drawn, some sacrifices were made, but here we are. I have settled on Bastion.
Wow.
That's right, Evie. Consider me a do-gooding Boy Scout Smurf Lord for life.
Well, I'm really proud of you, Tally. It's great that you've made such a meaningful decision and are sticking by it.
Thanks, Evie. I'm proud of me too. Now, if you'll excuse me, me and my new little Swolkin best friend, who's also kind of my slave, are off to start doing world quests for my new brothers in arms, my team, my fam, my Kyrian brethren. Evitel, I've changed my mind.
The portals are this way.
Knowledge is power.
Hello Internet, Taliesin here, and welcome to another episode of the Weekly Reset, Taliesin and Evitel's wondrous wisdom show in a week where the Shadowlands beta arrived. And, you're all on the beta now, right? So we can all play together on the beta, testing things and trying things and seeing things and generally all having a good old beta-y time together, and everyone is happy, I'd imagine. No, not everyone is happy, Internet. Not everyone is happy at all. Because although there is much to be happy and hyped about in Shadowlands right now, Madeline Rue's Shadows Rising hit this week and knocked it out of the park, we can now test all of the Covenant soulbinds and a whole ton of conduits for multiple classes, and forge legendaries and test Mythic Plus, and the whole week has basically been a delight of new things and joyous quests, and basically Shadowlands genuinely seems to have everything in place to be an absolute top draw expansion. Oh no, wait, there's just one last thing before I go, because whereas, yes, most testers do seem pretty united in the opinion that what is here so far is really good and promising, there is one feature, one very important feature that splits the player base so ferociously and is ringing alarm bells so loudly for so many of us that it threatens to undermine much of the good work that Blizz is undoubtedly doing with the new expansion. And when I say it splits the player base, that's true, but mostly it shows a pretty severe difference between Blizzard and a significant section of the player base in basically the whole philosophy of what this game should even be in the first place. And no, I'm not talking about the Bastion Flappy Bird World Quest, which I'm calling Basti Bird, because there's no discussion to have about Basti Bird. Basti Bird is exactly as fun as knob cancer, and that's the end of it. No, it's a split that was highlighted to an inignorable degree by Friday's live stream interview chat thing between game director Ion Hazzikostas and Preach. The question of whether restricting players' access to abilities by Covenant choice can ever be a good thing. It's the issue that might well define the legacy of Shadowlands, and we are going to take a good old look at it, the interview chat chill therapy stream, and how it feels on the beta itself in depth. But before we do that, honestly, we're going to need some fun stuff, okay?
Because, yes, it's been a week where we've had an unusual amount of new shiny goodness to unpack and play with, including Shadows Rising, the new prequel novel to the expansion, which arrived worldwide. Actually, arrived is far too polite a term for Shadows Rising. It burst through the door, drunk, wearing fancy dress for no apparent reason, started a fight, and then made out with your mum, because Shadows Rising is a big, fun, colorful romp, which is obviously meant as a massive compliment, because this book is a blast. I think we're going to do a full video review of it this week, so I won't go into too much detail now, but yes, all the spoilery lore spoilers you've heard about it is true, which means, among other things, that 2.5 years after the Save Zappy Boy campaign, Zappy Boy has not just been saved, he is well and truly canon. Even if, he may be needing a new in-game model in Shadowlands anyway. This week also saw massive updates to the beta with, first of all, Legendaries. A huge part of endgame power progression for all characters is going to be acquiring the resources you'll need to build those tasty orange treats, or rather, hand them over to the rune carver who is going to do it for you, apparently with one hand, since the other one is chained up and painful looking. Yeah, the Torghast rune carver literally crafts your legendaries for you with one hand tied behind his back, which is, frankly, showing off a bit. I also think I speak for plenty of us when I point out that this guy is considerably more massive than any of us were expecting, which, okay, doesn't prove Taliesin the rune carver might be Nazrithim or Proto-Nazrithim, just like the jailer might be too theory, which he brings up every now and then, but it certainly doesn't disprove it either. And a not disproven theory is basically definitely true, right? I'm pretty sure that's how speculation works. This being beta, we don't have to bother with any of that grinding or playing the game nonsense, as the Runetar NPC, nice one Blizz, is on hand to supply us with all the materials we need to build and test any legendary we like. Unless you're a druid or a rogue, in which case, F you because you haven't got any. Maybe go and test your soulbind conduits instead. Only joking, rogues, you haven't got any of those yet either. Seriously, F you. As you can see from the UI, you're going to need to have learned the actual legendary effect, obtained the correct piece of armor to stamp it, and gotten hold of whatever secondary stat runes you want to be involved too. Where do all those things come from? We're linking the Wowhead article with all the available legendary powers for every class and spec, which, yes, is useless for rogues right now, F you, but everyone else can go wild with. And many of these legendary powers are going to seem pretty familiar, with Legion legendary effects, Legion artifact traits, the occasional Azerite trait, Torghast anima powers, and old spec tier set bonuses cropping up for all classes. It's kind of like a greatest hits of cool old powers as all the celebs get together, like the Live Aid of Legendaries. The Alabaster Lady is definitely Bono, you know? Paladins seem especially happy with their lot right now, but there are important rotation-changing options for everyone here. When Shadowlands goes live, and for at least the first raid tier, probably longer, you'll only be able to equip one legendary at a time. Although, of course, you can craft as many as you're able, which is obviously better than Legion's do all the content to get the legendaries randomly, oh no, you got the wrong one and now you've hit the soft cap, so unlucky, time to reroll your entire character system. And there are plenty of coming soon slots in this collection too. So if there's an old set bonus or trait that you'd like to see make a return and that isn't in the current lineup, now's the time to give the feedback. Another big question about legendaries is, of course, how alts will go about acquiring them. Will it be the exact same process and length of time when it comes to gathering the required materials? People aren't going to like that, and I know, because I remember essences and the 8.3 cloak, because I have an amazing memory. We know that learned legendary recipes will be account-wide, which is going to be super handy if your alt is the exact same spec as your main, but possibly less so if they're not, unless it's possible to learn other classes' legendary recipes on your main, which seems unlikely. This will be an important and delicate balance for Blizz to strike. Is it a bit sad that no matter how cool a new system sounds for a main, our first reaction now is to ask, yeah, but what about alts? I guess that's just the game now. How could it not be when the game basically looks you in the eye and says, well, I hope you have at least 4 characters that you like to play because here are the covenants. All 4 Shadowlands teams are now available to test at level 60 on the beta, which means we get a proper look around the covenant sanctums, the class abilities, the soulbinds, the world quests, and the covenant campaigns, which is what I'm going to talk about now. So Redbot spoiler warning if you'd like to go in totally blind. The process of joining a covenant for the long haul once you reach level 60 is pretty simple, although what is cool is that you get a little preview of the armor set on your character and the covenant mount, which is neat. But from there, it's really just a case of getting a tour of your chosen sanctum, unlocking the mission table, getting totally blessed with your powers, hooking up with your first soulbind, and being sent on your way into the Maw, dailies, and covenant quests. Unless, that is, you are Night Fae, which opens with an entire amateur dramatics production complete with costume changes and high-budget action scenes, where you portray recent events from your homeworld to help educate the audience of Ardenweald denizens on the world you just came from. And look, you know I don't like to be hyperbolic on this show, especially because we are guaranteed to get shit whenever we say that we like something, but honestly, this is like the best quest ever in WoW. It's just delightful delightful from start to finish, and it would be brilliant enough anyway if all it was just the play, with a narrator explaining events and you reenacting them on stage with other actors, like when Xavius forgets their line in the first scene, or when you're fighting Gul'dan and Illidan totally kill steals with a "you were not ready," or when you dress up as Sargeras and plunge your sword into the planet, or when you become Nathanos to burn Teldrassil, and as the narrator puts it, "But before we could capture Sylvanas, she blighted the land and made her escape. This made everyone very unhappy." Or when you reenact the Ashara fight and the actor shouts, "Stand still but keep moving! Run right! But go left." But the thing that makes it pure genius is the audience reaction to things. Like when the concept of the WoD alternate timelines are being explained and there are shouts of, "What? How does that even work?" And the heated debate that rages when Sargeras stabs Azeroth. Wait, so there's a giant sword stuck in their world. How does that work? I was an environmental protector in life. You can't just stab a planet without serious repercussions to, well, everything. How would you even make a sword that big anyway? There's also some very interesting discussions about Titan world souls and the missing souls of the Night Elves who were killed in the burning of Teldrassil, a plot point which is then picked up very quickly in the Ardenweald Covenant campaign. And so far, all 4 of the max level Covenant questlines seem to be pretty good and certainly live up to the BFA war campaign standard as promised. The Kyrian one starts off especially strongly as you relive the last day of Ben Howell of Lakeshire, as he falls trying to protect his family in the upcoming pre-patch Scourge invasions. But yes, I'm going to focus on the Ardenweald version again for a moment because it starts tying up some seriously loose BFA ends, namely that of Tyrande and the Night Elves of Teldrassil. This particular questline just made me feel really good, actually, because, you know, Evitel is a Night Elf hunter, so I have skin in this game. The campaign begins with trying to hunt down Tyrande in the Maw and bring her back, which I don't need to spoil, and along the way you head into Torghast and rescue the souls of the Night Elves. There's a big room full of tortured Night Elf souls, and okay, so some of them amalgamate into a big sad monster that we have to kill, but all the rest are totally rescued by us and taken to Ardenweald, where they can live out the rest of eternity in happy animal-y goodness. And that was just really great. Like, a lot of people criticize WoW for not tying up loose ends and finishing storylines in an expansion. That is, when they aren't criticizing Blizz for tying up storylines in just one measly expansion. But I'm glad we've had time to mourn the Night Elves properly before we were able to actually help them. That's just me. You can hate it if you like. That's cool too.
And so, on to our main story of the day, which is kind of about Preacher's sit-down chat with Ion Hazzikostas, but is of course really about the wider issue that they were discussing, namely player power and specifically how that is impacted by the Covenant choice in Shadowlands and the intended restrictions that come with that choice. And in fairness, it's not like this is the first time we've discussed this topic on the show, and you know, spoiler for the interview, but it doesn't seem like it's going to be the last. The restrictions around having player abilities exclusive to Covenant choice and the obvious glaring potential that has to render a player feeling like they aren't able to become optimal in certain gameplay simply because of which best friends forever super gang they chose in the first week of Shadowlands has been the #1 concern for everyone paying attention to this game since it was announced at BlizzCon. This one glaring issue is becoming bigger and more dominating in all World of Warcraft discourse, which is fair enough. No one wants another Azerite armor disaster on their hands here, and the BFA experience proved that having an annoying and unsatisfactory central progression mechanic is enough to ruin an expansion for many players. So everyone wants to get this right. And it was fascinating to hear 2 people, both of whom I have a ton of respect for, by the way, both of whom I think are way smarter than me, both in terms of how they understand this game that I like, but also just like, you know, generally chatting out in such a civilized environment. And yes, I did have chat closed as I watched, why do you ask? And Preach opened the talk with a pretty simple question. Why? Why is this system what we're going for in Shadowlands? Why do we think it's a good idea to wall off 6 out of 8 new abilities to a player? Can it possibly be a good idea to restrict the abilities that a character can use depending on the Covenant that they join? Can it be a fun mechanic, or is it doomed to frustrate and anger the player base at all levels of play? To which Ian replied that when it comes to covenants, they want it to be an issue of identity versus moment-to-moment decisions. More like the class you pick, which obviously completely dictates the abilities that you have available to use, than say the talents that you pick, which are intended to be swapped out and altered many times throughout a gaming session. Blizz want it to be a difficult choice because, according to Ian, that adds richness and depth to the world. He suggested that a good idea might be to create like a max level arena type thing in Torghast where players could go and test out other Covenant abilities so that if they were unhappy with their choice, they could make a better informed decision about which Covenant to change to. Ian also said that he thought in terms of restriction to players, he considered the choice players made about which spec they wanted to focus on at the beginning of Legion was far more impactful than anything that awaits them in Shadowlands, both in terms of progressing an artifact weapon and the legendaries that would drop for you because of it. And part of the challenge, as he sees it, is making sure that the gaps in power between Covenants aren't too large and that there is never a wrong choice. He then went on to seemingly accuse top-end players of wanting to eliminate variance, which might be true, but is also kind of understandable. Preach countered that by saying that since around late WoD, early Legion, there has been too much RNG added to the game and to player power in particular, which makes it impossible to compare yourself to other players, which is absolutely correct, and Ian acknowledged so, but pointed out that choices, such as which Covenant to join, isn't RNG, and that in his opinion, those sort of decisions are in themselves fundamental to player power in an RPG, as is gear. This is not a flat track FPS game, and where those decisions and the differences in player power they produce can cause friction, and I quote, "Friction has benefits that aren't apparent until that friction is removed." Ian used the LFG tool as what I'd imagine is a pretty popular example of such friction being removed, which is where we started getting to the real meat of this discussion. As Preach said, it sounded like this could be a hill that Blizz was choosing to die on, and that he just couldn't understand why. How, in his opinion, allowing everyone access to every Covenant ability wouldn't go against what Ian said Blizz are trying to achieve. For example, why not just let everyone use every soulbind with quests to recruit those soulbinds? Ian's response to that was that the differentiation was the point, and that's why they were building the system around that. In the team's opinion, and I think this is important to understanding their view here, WoW already has enough ways to change your loadout on the fly, and that's not the area they want to develop. Instead, they approach the Covenant system as a way to create longer term differentiation within classes and specs, to which Preach said he understood the aim, but he disagrees that, say, Shackle the Unworthy for DK offers much of that immersion value, and that plenty of these Covenant abilities can be dead buttons for their spec. How much of a sacrifice, he asked, are Blizzard willing to force players to make to fit this system in? Which is where the fundamental difference in philosophy starts to become pretty apparent. As Ian replied that, using Shackle the Unworthy as an example, the limitation of having, say, a Bastion Death Knight more tied to single target DPS than one in another Covenant is preferable. He said that with total freedom in layouts, as Preach is asking for, there is always a right answer, and seemed to suggest that the limitations in Covenants would help to remove that right answer, that he thought having Covenants would lessen the assumptions Pug leaders can make about you as a player, which, okay, I'll be giving my opinion on that statement after this summary for sure. And yeah, Preach couldn't understand that at all, and that surely, in terms of people making judgments about other players, this system just increases the potential number of points of failure, and that people absolutely will judge a player by their Covenant choice and absolutely will call for specific Covenants in Pugs, which Ian acknowledged could happen, but which he said would also depend largely on the extremes, in the way that triple hunter groups or night elf only groups haven't filtered down from the MDI to Pugs, because overall players appreciate that WoW is a world where there are different strengths and weaknesses, just so long as it's not too swingy. To which Preach replied, it's a subjective thing, which yeah, no shit, I think this conversation conversation has clearly proved. In closing, he asked how confident Blizz were that the really multiple new systems being introduced in Shadowlands would be balanced, to which Ion answered, yeah, kind of, probably not, but good enough, hopefully, and stressed that there is plenty of beta time to play with, and that yes, they are still committed to this system and making it work. As Ion reiterated what he has said in earlier interviews, that if worst comes to the worst, there is that safety net of just scrapping the whole thing and indeed opening up every choice to every player. Oh yeah, and the destroyable conduits can be totally changed from how they are in the beta right now. And that was pretty much that for the chat. And isn't that refreshing? Don't you agree how nice it is that we have the kind of community where the lead developer of a game spends an hour on stream with a creator discussing design philosophy and concerns? Well, actually, it doesn't really matter if you agree, because I'll tell you who did agree: the forums, which were buzzing with happiness, like happy little bees, celebrating how, whatever their personal views on this issue may be, it was definitely valuable to hear two knowledgeable and passionate minds talk it all through with such it was a shit show, obviously. That interview was an absolute train wreck. Ion's so out of touch it makes me sad. Ion got slaughtered. Guy's playing an entirely different game than we are playing. For each asks a question, Ion proceeds to completely talk in circles and not give an answer. Either Blizzard fixes this mess or game dies. I'm heartbroken, man. I feel like skies are falling on me hearing what Ion is saying. Yeah, this happens a lot when Ion answers questions, or for that matter, when anyone answers questions on the internet. People seem to mistake giving an answer that they don't like with not giving an answer, and that definitely seems to be what's happened here, because to say Ion didn't answer Preacher's questions is disingenuous, honestly. The problem is that he didn't say exactly what people wanted to hear, which would have presumably been, you know what, Preacher, you are totally right. Paging the team now to get them to shit all our ideas right off and do it your way, and yes, I use a pager because the forums are right, I am a dick. But what you had instead was essentially one guy saying, this isn't going to work or be fun, and here's why, and another saying, well, actually, I think it will, and here's why. Does that mean I agree with Ion? Not really, no. Okay, that's actually unfair. Philosophically, I totally agree with Ion, and I 100% want him to be right about this. After the interview, I saw a tweet from JB that said, don't think I've seen anyone get geeked up about unswappable covenants. Never seen anyone stan it. Well, JB, I'm here to tell you, and I'm not proud of this, that stan is me. Because I love the idea of unswappable covenants that give you a class ability that only people in your covenant can use, and people in the other covenants can't, and vice versa. Because I've always enjoyed choices in games that restrict my options alongside broadening my options. In purely WoW terms, I like that if I pick a rogue, I am committed to melee DPS. There's no tanking or healing or even ranged option. That's me right there. I like that in Divinity 2, the character I pick dictates the story that I get, and if I want other stories, I have to literally start a new game with new characters to do it. I like that in Bloodlines, I can choose to play as a Nosferatu, and I literally can't use half of the map because I have to travel about under the sewers or people attack me. And yeah, I'm sorry everyone, but I really like the idea that I'm going to choose a covenant on, say, my priest, and I will have an ability to use and some soulbinds that other priests can't use, and that's just fun to me because it makes my experience feel more personal. Could I get that personal experience with just transmog and stories and cosmetics? Absolutely yes. Is it more fun to me as an idea to have a couple of abilities in there too? Absolutely, yes. Am I having a lot of difficulty trying to decide which covenant to join? Absolutely. My favourite covenant aesthetically is Venthyr. My favourite story so far is Nightfade. My favourite covenant ability and chonky mount is Necrolord, but my favourite soulbinds are Kyrian. Am I enjoying how difficult it is to make my choice? Absolutely. It's great being pulled in so many different directions and to be made to think so hard about my decision and then have that decision define my character in a number of ways. That, for me, and I'm only speaking for myself, is fun. Am I in a pretty privileged position where, you know, playing WoW is basically my job and I know I'm going to have at least 12 ults, so it's unlikely that I am actually going to miss anything in the long run? Absolutely. Does that mean I agree with Ion that this is going to work? no. And just because I agree with everything he says from an ideal perspective, I can also see how the other things that he thinks the system will help, like pug leaders not making judgments on you as a player, because you have chosen a covenant which the community recognises as suboptimal for your class. Yeah, that's not going to happen. You are going to get judged to shit. Pug leaders absolutely are going to specify certain covenants that they want and make assumptions about how good a player you are based on covenant choice for your class. Cutting edge raiders are going to get asked to swap covenants at least as often as they get asked to swap class now, and there definitely are going to be many players at all levels a few months into the expansion who feel totally cheated that they can't even try to do the cool stuff that they've seen other players do in-game or on Twitch because of the meaningful choice that they made in week 1. So yeah, I'm torn. I like the idea of covenants very much, and I want Ian to be right. And as a community, we do tend to judge ideas as if their worst case scenario is the only possible scenario, but at the same time, it kind of feels that so much of the community is so dead set against the idea right now that even if it turned out totally balanced and actually was the superior fun that Ian hopes, most of us would just say it wasn't and complain about it anyway. And frankly, Blizz could just save themselves a lot of hassle and make themselves a ton more money by letting players choose covenant abilities like talents like they say they want. An option which Ian has said from the start is there as a fallback if they can't make the system work like they want to. I'm aware that even by entertaining the idea that a restriction in player power is a fun and interesting thing, I'm placing myself on ground that a lot of you simply won't understand, and which will likely make some of you very angry and ignore the rest of what I've said, the bit where I agree with pretty much all of your concerns about the system. But man, I mean, I just can't help it. I still just really like it to work. Okay, I feel I should clarify something.
Okay.
You know, we've memed pretty hard in this episode, the whole Basti Bird thing.
Hardcore
okay,
memeing.
yeah. And I feel like, you know, if I was the dev that had designed the Basti Bird world quest, I might be sitting there basically in tears now, or at the very least cancelling my T&E patron or something like that, which
possible.
obviously all the devs are a part of. Apart from the fact that we don't want to lose a patron, I want to clarify that, you know, the Basti Bird world quest is fine. There's nothing wrong with it.
Is it really?
Well,
is it really though? Because I watched you fail really hard.
Okay, because it's
like really hard.
It's incompletable at the moment. All right, it's clearly broken. Like none of the hitboxes are actually in. No, it's literally impossible at the moment. So that kind of breeds a thing where anyone testing it at the moment automatically hates it. Because the thing about like Flappy Bird is it's quite annoying anyway.
Yeah.
And it's exquisite, like it's perfectly tuned and it's beautiful, and like even then it's really annoying. So when it's like literally broken and doesn't work, it's the most infuriating thing in the world. And that's beta. That's absolutely fine. It's there, but it means that I was like, I want to get some footage of me completing it. Right, I'm not gonna have just footage of me constantly failing like an absolute scrub. So I was there for about half an hour, and like I was in tears. There was tears rolling down my face. My face was red. I was like reconsidering everything in my entire life. Like my child had grown up and gone to college, and I was like, Evitel, come in here and see this. And I wanted to come and just like give me a little rub on my back and say just everything was going to be okay. And she walked in the office and she saw it and she was like, oh cool, Flappy Bird. I was like, no.
And you just kept dying at that moment.
It's so
literally
horrible.
Impossible at this stage.
It's so horrible. But you really like Flappy Bird. Like you were genuinely pleased to see it happen.
I mean, it made me, it made me smile. I liked seeing it. I liked seeing it happen. I like seeing you struggle through it. But I don't know how I'm going to feel when I have to actually do it.
So if you are the dev that was responsible for Basti Bird, please know that we're very happy and that it's really good. And we were just joking. Yeah. We were just memeing. Okay?
I think it's great. I can't wait to do it. It's like the jellyfish quest. You know, do you remember the jellyfish quest? And it's like,
yeah, I do remember the jellyfish quest. I remember how much everyone hated that.
And at first no one could do it, but then they tuned it, and then everyone could do it.
But isn't that the whole point, though? It's like the thing that's fun about Flappy Bird is that it's a challenge, okay? Yeah. And the thing about having it as a world quest is that you can't make it a challenge, because then you're in a situation where you can either do it or you can't. Yeah. And there'll be lots of people that simply can't do it and can't complete it. And then there's one less world quest that they can get every day, and they're a major disadvantage.
Well, like, what about the calligraphy quests? There are people people who will literally never be able to do those quests. How many times did you have to try to draw a perfect circle?
Well, I mean, I did it first time every time blindfolded, so I don't even know what you're talking about.
Okay.
I never watched, but I bet World First Raiders have an add-on that does it for them. Like they have an add-on that does the shell game for them. That's
no!
Yeah, I know.
The shell game is so easy.
I was watching some World Second Raiders, who I can't even remember the name of their guild now, but I was watching them once on Twitch, and they were doing world quests in between pulls or whatever, and they had add-ons for literally every world quest, including the shell game, and I was like, dude,
wait, so it just remembers which?
Yeah, it just tracks it. You know, you've got an add-on that does all your world quests for you, and then at the end of it, you're like, oh, world quests are so boring. You obviously have to get different bits of armor for him to make the legendary outfit.
Right.
Okay, and I was looking at all these things that I could turn into legendary items, like rings, gloves, shoes, and I was like, yeah, but don't forget, that's how at the moment that's how you get those cool Moor and Torghast armor sets. Is those are the legendary appearances. So why is everyone who's gonna make a ring?
Exactly.
Who's gonna be like, do I make an amazing helmet which looks like a screaming devil gargoyle thing?
Yeah.
Do I make incredible spolders that are spiky awesomeness like the jailer? Do I make a
sets.
really cool chest piece with spikes and bars and stuff on it? Or do I make a ring?
Yeah. Or bracers.
No.
That's
what I want. I'm not going to lie to you, Evitel. It's going to be a long time till I make a legendary cloak. It's going to be a long old time until I make a legendary cloak. So with all the talk about covenants this week and what have you, I'm going to ask you this every week. Have you given any more thought to what your covenant will be?
I have. And now I'm even more confused. All I know is that I'm definitely not doing the Necrolords. Although, if they get the Baron and Baroness titles, then maybe I will go in that direction.
Oh, the titles! Yeah, something you didn't mention. Like when you reach, a certain level with your covenant, you get a title.
Presumably.
Can you remember what the titles are?
There's Count and Countess.
That's obviously Revendreth.
Yeah.
These are data mines, so
so who knows? There's Baron and Baroness.
That is pretty cool.
Necrolords, I'm
That's
guessing.
definitely Necrolords because she's a Baroness Drakkar, isn't she?
Yeah. And then there's something about the frost ice person.
Is it of the Winter Court or something like that?
Yeah. The Ardenweald one, which I'm actually not that into.
Okay.
And then what was the Bastion one? I don't even remember what the Bastion one was. It didn't.
Your number one source for World of Warcraft news,
Listen.
keeping you up to date with all the latest news.
All I saw were Baroness and Countess, and I was like, that's cool. I want those. So who knows? It's all up in the air now.
Wow.
It's literally all up in the air. I'm
yeah.
torn. I'm lost.
And
confused.
it's fair to say, I mean, and is that bad for you or is that good? Because every time I get something that changes what I wanted, I actually find that quite fun. Yeah,
it's not bad right now. It might be bad when, the game comes in December or whatever it comes.
And you actually have to make
I actually have to make a decision. But we'll see. We'll see how things kind of lead up in the beta. Maybe something, sway me, and we'll see.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us today. If you like this episode, don't thank us. Thank our patrons who give their actual real-life money to make all of our work happen, guys. Thank you. Without you, there'd be a whole lot less Taliesin and Evitel, which would be a bad thing.
It's true.
If you like Taliesin and Evitel.
Yeah.
If you didn't like it, downvote the shit out of it. Remember, my name is JB. No, my name is Taliesin from me.
And me, Evitel.
And Anirin too. He's sleeping like a good boy. Good snoozy boy.
He's a good bean.
Yeah. Cheerio.